Ja, ich habe das war auch bei der
Sorry, Shana is missing, but I think we will start anyway because after this reception, so a little bit time.
Yeah. Someone is missing? Is coming late or
No,
missing
it's
altogether?
we have the speaker from Global Growth Institute, the director for Asia.
All right. Yeah.
Ich hoffe ja nur, dass unsere Oberbürgermeisterin da ist, Katja Börner ist. Hat die sich...
Welche ist denn Oberbürger? Du bist?
Ja, ich bin eigentlich aus Leipzig.
Wollte ich
aber
doch sagen. Ich
ja,
sortiere dich nach Leipzig.
Wir können ja nicht badgen, weil wir 90%, 100% öffentlich finanziert sind wir. Nation sozusagen. Aber ich arbeite ja noch auch schon 20 Jahre beim DKKV. Da sitzen wir. Wir sehen uns mal.
Ja,
war schön.
Später.
So, good afternoon and welcome to this session on NAP's gaps assessment and strengthening capacity, institutional capacity for adaptation, national adaptation plans. My name is Nicola Tollin. I'm UNESCO Chair on Urban Resilience at the University of Southern Denmark. Thank you very much for being here these late hours and after almost 2 weeks of negotiation. It's very much appreciated. And we are going to have a bit of an interactive session together also to discuss about key barriers and also financial issues regarding to NAP's development and implementation. This session is co-organized by the Global Green Growth Institute and the University of Twente. And as a starting point, we will use the National Adaptation Plan gap assessment that is coordinated by GGGI and led by Professor Rekken from University of Twente in partnership with the organization that you can see listed here at the bottom of this slide. This assessment is going to be very important within the negotiation space as it aims to identify best practices in NAP's development and implementation. It aims at feeding in the stock-taking process, informing also the further strengthening and further development of other NAPs. For this session today, we will have 3 presentation speeches from our esteemed speakers that I welcome here on the stage with us, and after we will have a more interactive session to look at some of the key components of NAPs and barriers for implementation. So without any further ado, I would like to invite here on the podium our first speaker, Diana Rekken, Associate Professor at the University of Twente. Diana, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Simon. Do I keep sitting or?
As you prefer. You can come here or keep on sitting as you wish.
Okay, maybe I try this. Can I advance the slides? Yes, okay, so then I stand. Yeah, good afternoon or good evening, everyone, and welcome to the sessions. Thanks, Simon, for the nice introduction. So yes, I am Diana Rekken of the University of Twente in the Netherlands, and we are having this project with the Global Green Growth Institute together with a number of partners that you all see here at the bottom of the slides, always with their icon. We have looked into gaps and guidances and want to develop good practices for national adaptation plans. You see here our current output. It's just a 4-pager, and you also have the QR code on there, so to download and see some more details. This is just the current draft report. We are writing up more analysis and more findings, so stay tuned. Like in a month or so, or maybe 2, we have the full report. Where we started, this is that as part of the GST, all countries are demanded to develop NAPs or improve their NAPs, but doing adaptation and adaptation assessment is not trivial. There is not a scientific agreed way how you can do that. And so a lot of scientists, but also practice partners, start by assessing their planning outputs. And indeed, you could say that the best to ensure rigorous adaptation is, or the best way to do adaptation is a rigorous adaptation planning. We have some lessons from plan evaluation on the local, so on the urban level. And there was a paper more recently this year coming out by myself and a number of European authors across all the European countries. And there we looked at the quality of local adaptation plans. And the quality is formulated in what we currently know, a adaptation plan should best include to lead to proper and fast and rigorous implementation. Yeah? So we started from that, and then we said, and Stelios reached out to me and said, Diana, can't we do something like that on the national level? I think this would be really helpful. So we set out to identify best practices, to develop guidelines and recommendations, really showing the positive aspect of what can be done, what is already being done in a great way, and then also, of course, to feed into the adaptation and into the global stocktake, the adaptation part of it. Just very quickly on the process. So we consulted a number of our team in the urban assessment, and we looked at a large number of literature as well, what might be different for the national level. Then we developed a first draft and developed a review protocol. So review protocol is very important, as we have seen, that you really describe what you mean by assessing each and every question and indicator that you should look at, because we are always working with multiple partners across multiple countries, across multiple scientific but also cultural backgrounds, and that means that you really need to be clear on what people are coding for or not. Then we tested that on 6 NAPs. We finalized our what we now call NAP GGGP, so the gaps and guidance for good practices in national adaptation plans. And then we analyzed, so we have data for 45 now. There are currently 50 NAPs submitted, so we can keep on going, right? And I am presenting a first synthesis of that. My data here represents 42 NAPs, and this is how our framework looks like. So this is in line with what other people would call a planning cycle or decision cycle that we are also looking at. Okay, I don't have a pointer. At the top, what are the goals? Are the goals clearly formulated? Then, how does participation come in? What do we know about fact base? Are the fact base clearly represented and presented? What do we see in the NAPs about policies and measures? What do we get to know about implementation details? Yeah? Timelines, responsibilities, aspects like that. Does the NAP mention M&E? How detailed are they? How quantitative is that? In what time frame? and who is responsible for that. And then also a very important aspect that is not covered on the local level usually, but here is very central, is the finance part. And we're really looking into, are the costs of the adaptation outlined, are costs of inactions outlined, are innovative funding sources identified. And by looking at all these NUPs, we can also then see, okay, that in that country has identified a very innovative potential funding part, so that then could be communicated to the others. So here we have these 7 categories, 56 elements and 44 sub-elements. That is what I mean, what are the individual criteria below those 7 categories. And then what are our first results? So here in the wheel, everything what is covered in green is already pretty well represented in the NUPs. So the largest category is fact-based, and 75% of the criteria that we believe is an important indicator for implementation is covered across all the NAPs that we have currently analyzed. So this also means that countries could still get better by answering or implementing information, so including information on 25% more of the aspects that we regard is a good indicator for implementation. But it's not bad. And then 70% of the plans detail out goals in a way that we think is promising. With regard to policy and measures, we have 74% of those aspects detailed out, and with regard to implementation, at least 69. So this is really something on timelines, responsibilities, sectoral collaboration, goals per sector, not just a very broad goal, potentially a quantitative goal, aspects like that. Where NUPs are a little bit, let's say, representing information less well is for participation and monitoring and evaluation. So here we think there is room for improvement. Only 56% or 57% of the aspects that we regard as important for implementation is currently addressed or reported in the NUPs, and only 56 for M&E. So there really NUPs can improve over the next years, and then when it comes to finance, even more. Finance is the issue that really is a critical aspect through all negotiation streams, and also here in the NUPs, right? So then with that, let's see what we currently learn about best practices. So in order to get to these nearly 100%, let's say, how can countries learn from each other? And when it comes to goals, and good goals, so I'm pointing to the green aspects here first, there a guideline would be that best work with SMART objectives. So that they are time-bound, relevant, actionable, specific, and measurable. And that best for adaptation and for the implementation. And also, it's important that these are really specific to the country's climate change impacts. On the local level, we have seen that a lot of cities are actually just taking up what other cities are doing. And that is, on the one hand, a good sign, because cities are learning from each other through city networks, but on the other hand, then they are less specific and less relevant for their own jurisdiction. So you still need that check. Is it really what I'm doing the most suitable, the most relevant for my jurisdiction. We have a very good example from Peru, which integrates goals into gender and other social policies, sets quantitative goals, even though that is very complicated, and they do it by highlighting percentages of climate change actions that are already implemented in prioritized areas. And then when it comes to implementation, what we would advise is to prioritize adaptation actions. So say, what's the most important? What am I doing first, second, third? Then define implementation timelines and also use an institutional framework, like who is reporting to whom, who is getting support of whom. And then design responsible parties for implementation and identify potential barriers. We have a number of good practice examples here. Timor-Leste, for instance, assigning specific lead agency to prioritize actions. Or Bangladesh has a vertical integration in its institutional arrangement for adaptation. Very innovative. And then Cabo Verde has here identified barriers to the implementation of action for two of the highest priority risk areas. So other countries can then look up those NAPs and can get inspiration. With regard to participation, we advise to increase that throughout the process and best before the goal setting starts. So really from the beginning. And include vulnerable groups, women and youth. We have two very good examples here from Fiji. There in Fiji, they developed a NAP steering or adopted a NAP steering committee to include relevant technical expertise that is responsive to the needs of all stakeholders. And in South Africa, we have particular mention of youth representatives addressing the need of infants, but also child-headed households and women. And then when it comes to M&E, we would advise that time-specific indicators are a good idea. Make vulnerable populations or representatives of those groups and also vulnerable industries part of the M&E. Here we have a good example from Togo. They have a very robust M&E system that outlines targets to monitor implementation, assigns responsibilities across ministerial, local authorities, civil society and private actor levels, so on various levels. And they also engage diverse groups and communities at each level to ensure that all of them can actually say whether the NAP has worked or not in reducing risk. And then the final one here for the finance part. And there we would advise, try at least to recognize and identify financial gaps, targeted resources mobilization plans, and highlight the cost of inaction, but also of delaying action versus of the action itself. There are also quite a few examples for good practices, like Burkina Faso. They predict that the GDP loss of, you can read the numbers, billion by 2050 would accrue if no action is taken. So the relatively low cost of adaptation that they had also outlined is a really compelling argument. And in Armenia, we see a financing framework and implementation plan for climate change adaptation that is tailored to involve the private sector. Also very innovative and usually a shortcoming. In Papua New Guinea, we see a strategy that involves creating the Climate Resilience and Green Growth Trust Fund to channel revenue sources. So also a very innovative example of how you can tackle the financial challenges. So with that, just wrapping up the highlights, we see if you look at our NAP GGGP framework, so you have a structured approach to the NAP development. You can use the best practices to get inspired and potentially integrate into yours. We are giving advice for an enhanced stakeholder engagement, and we hope that this indeed leads to enhanced implementation prospects. With that, thank you so much. That is the draft, that's the current analysis that we have, and as I said before, stay tuned for the full report when we have all of the countries' NAPs analyzed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne, for this very insightful presentation of best practices. Now I have the pleasure to call here Gabriel Paca, that's the chair of the least developed countries expert group. Gabriel, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, it's a pleasure for the leg to be here, at least to make some key remarks on, of course, NAPs. As most of you know, NAP sits at the heart of the leg because one of our key mandates is in making sure that all LDC, of course, have their NAP. So we assist them to formulate their NAPs and also for them to implement their NAPs. So we've been working this with other organizations. So it's a pleasure to be here. And of course, when it comes to capacity building and capacity development, we know that it remains very much essential, of course, for the LDCs, and because it's an ongoing process. So for this particular segment, I'll just try to highlight some key needs of the LDC, and also what we are doing as the leg in making sure that we address this, and that's why we always work with other, of course, constituent bodies and also other organizations in delivering these mandates. So first, for the key needs, that is very key, is one, enhancing provision of support for countries that are struggling to make swift progress towards submitting their first NAP. And with this, I think is a challenge that stands out for most of the LDC countries, because when it comes to the formulation, you need money, of course, definitely for them to either do some assessment or maybe to hire a kind of a consultant or to even do an engagement to have their NAP. This has been one of the key challenges for most of the LDCs. And also the needs also has to do with providing support to the LDC for implementing adaptation priorities, identifying their NAPs, and also considering how to further scale up adaptation in the LDC through the long-term programming approach. So for the leg, our vision, of course, is to see that LDC that have their NAP can implement the adaptation priorities. So it's a kind of like the NAP is a guiding book. So when it comes to any project you want to formulate or you want to implement, they can quickly go through their NAP in order for them to flesh out a particular programs they want to implement. But some LDC countries that are yet to have their NAP, they can use any existing adaptation programs they have. And the good thing for NAP is that it tries to integrate each and every policies within the countries because it's like a national driven process. Another key one is also the adequate and effective access to financial support, including, of course, from the GCF. We all know that there's a mandate for, of course, the Readiness Fund for the LDCs to access, for them to formulate their NAP, and also funding for them to implement. So we know from what we've gathered from the LDC, there is this huge bottleneck for them to have, of course, the funding in time for them to implement, but we also have some strategy we are doing for them, at least for them not to be left behind. And also some technical capacity to write proposal for accessing funding under the different windows that are available, be the LDCF, the JEF, and also even the adaptation fund. And also another needs has to do with technical guidance, of course, and also capacity building for national stakeholders for the formulation and implementation of NAPs. Climate change, to be precise, is not like a household name for every country. For some countries, you just have selected sets of people that normally push the agenda, So the need for capacity development is very key, and also they have this difficulty in securing delivering partners, agencies, or the authorities to support their project development. Because the thing that is happening is that for most of the LDC, because I also come from an LDC country, which is Sierra Leone. So countries are used to a particular program. wherein delivery partners, say the UNDP, the UNEP, or FAO, come to the country and say, okay, there's this project, can we work on this? So instead of the other way, for countries to look through their NAP, see what are the sectors that have, of course, been vulnerable, and then at least to work together with the project ideas to get that through. So in this regard, from us, from the leg, of course, we continue to provide this technical support and capacity building to addressing these needs, and I will try to highlight how we do it. The first one is that we use the Open NAP initiative, which is a kind of like a crowdsourcing, and as it mobilizes and engages with a wide range of organizations. So the crowdsourcing is like we have organizations, they work with the LDCs and also with us, the leg, in order for us to provide the support to them. And then another one is a country dialogue on, of course, their gaps and needs, which you do, and of course, something we of course, will be doing also for this COP. So we engage with countries directly for us to know what are the needs, what are the challenges they are faced with, and then we can roll that within our programs for the leg. And also we do, of course, peer review of draft NAPs. That is like any country, because know that NAP is like a country-driven process. We've developed supplements, guidelines, of course, from organization. So when they draft their NAP, from the leg side and also to the organization, we try to review and then provide comments, because it's a national document. So with that comment, with the aim that they can try to address them. And also we have the NAP Implementation Pipeline Development Initiative. That is like trying to see how countries can look through their NAP or any programs they have to generate a kind of like an adaptation project. So like, you know, they cannot develop a full-blown GCF project or GCF or GEF project. So it's like for them to just have a kind of a project idea, of which you have already a template. So they generate this project idea. From the project idea, then they can identify the delivery partner for them to push through. And we'll be doing this through our NAP writing workshops. Of course, recent one we had in February. For the African LDCs and Haiti, it was in Comoros. Of course, they have been trained to see how they can try to generate their project ideas. And also, we completed another one for the Asian LDCs, of course, in Nepal in September. And of course, for the year ahead, we're going to also roll out this going forward. So I can tell you that since 2022, we have about 40 of the 46 LDC countries have developed around 92 project ideas. It's a huge ambition. So we want to see maybe how these project ideas can be born into project proposal, and then they can implement this, of course, on the ground. And also, recently, but some of you that, as I can see the faces here, that follow us doing our side events, the leg side event, we launched the mapping of available sources of finance for climate change adaptation for the least developed countries. So we've just tried to map out. So at a glance, the LDC can know, okay, this fund is available for you. How can you access this, and what are the modalities? And then also through the NAP data initiative support, we know that data is very key, and there is a huge data gap when it comes to the LDC countries. So we have, of course, this initiative where we've been training LDCs for them to know what are these data sources they can use for elaboration of their NAPs, or even when it comes to the implementation of their adaptation plans. And also, as I'm trying to conclude also, we've also developed roster of experts, of course, on national adaptation plan. The idea is like there should be, of course, on our portal, you can go through, you can get an expert that is good when it comes to institutional arrangement. There's an expert when it comes to M&E, expert when it comes to financing, expert when it comes to adaptation priorities, highlighting them. So it's like a one-stop shop where an LDC can go through and then they can, of course, use them. In fact, we've even been calling upon even some donor agencies and organizations to also utilize this roster of experts, because you know this is in the African region, so the experts can look through that one. So for the NAP data initiative, of course, the leg, of course, we try to assist the LDCs in addressing the data gap, and also we are trying to push through, of course, developing of technical guidelines on the implementation of NAPs, which is currently ongoing. It's not a document, but it's kind of like a roadwork, so that people can know when you have a NAP, what are the processes going to follow, so that at least you can implement your NAP and have a tangible outcome. So in conclusion, of course, from the side of the leg, we will continue to leverage our global network and provide direct support to the LDCs in the NAP processes, at least for further formulation and implementation of their NAPs, and also providing and facilitating capacity building for the LDC. So from our side, we want to emphasize that, of course, while we are providing this guidance and support in formulation and implementation of NAPs, The formulation of NAPs, we know that it's a country-driven process, and in general, the NAP documents are developed based on assessments. So, of course, they use data that are available in the country, so that goes through rigorous consultation process, and as such, we do not, on the behalf of the leg, we do not assess the quality of the NAP itself, because it's an iterative process. They always have a time, it's a living document for them to go through and then revise whatever area they want to revise. So with that, I think I don't want to say too long. I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity, and we'll continue engaging with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gabriel, for highlighting both needs but also ambition on the NAP work. Now I would like to welcome Yera Chala-Besinghe, that's Regional Director for Asia for the Global Green Growth Institute. Chala, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you. Good evening to you all. It is such a pleasure to see Gabriel on the stage and leading the least developed countries expert group. I remember when Gabriel started as a negotiator in the UNFCCC process, I was the legal and strategic advisor to the least developed countries group from 2010 to 2019. So I had a long history, I still have a long history with the least developed countries group. So prime example of capacity strengthening and helping our colleagues from these countries to become leaders. I am the Asia Director at the Global Green Growth Institute. These colleagues who are mentioned here, Stelios and Shivnes, have done the hard work with Diana and other colleagues. I am just here to say that I'm very pleased to represent GGGI in this meeting, and also to say that actually before this whole concept of national adaptation plans came to effect, it was the LDCs again who led the planning process under the National Adaptation Program of Action, NAPA process. That was before the Paris Agreement was adopted. And so if we are to talk about capacity strengthening and the need to learn from our countries, I think the LDC group is one of the best groups to turn into and learn from for the planning process, as well as to address the gaps and also set good practices. GGGI, Global Green Growth Institute, works with our member countries and partner countries to really help them in their transition and transformation for green growth, and that involves resilience and adaptation, and also addressing loss and damage due to climate impacts. And so doing this kind of exercise, particularly focusing on gaps and also bringing in good practices as a guidance tool, I think is extremely important for us, for our member countries, as well as I think it is going to be useful for all the countries who are really looking into this planning process. And one thing I want to say in my remarks is that the planning process, all the steps that Diana mentioned in her presentation, among those, the major gap that we are seeing on the ground, as you presented, is the financing part. And what we are now trying to do is to really bring in that capacity strengthening aspect vertically and horizontally, to work across ministries and with ministries to really think about developing a strong project pipeline in alignment with the national adaptation plans, to really bring in the financing side. And the financing side actually is also linked to not only the multilateral funding sources that we mentioned here, the Green Climate Fund, the LDC Fund, Adaptation Fund, etc., but also there are areas in which we could look at in terms of innovative financial sources. And to do that, I think we also need to have very proactive participation participation from the finance ministries. So that requires capacity strengthening not only in the ministries of finance, ministries of climate change, but also capacity strengthening for ministries of environment, climate change to really work with the finance ministries so that they talk to each other and bring in that financing discussion to the whole exercise. GGGI is a partner advisor to the Coalition of Finance Ministers on the theme of adaptation, and we are working very closely with our countries on this subject, as I mentioned. And in a number of countries, we are developing national adaptation plans, or we are implementing the national adaptation plans. I can give one example from my own country, Sri Lanka. We are actually going into all 9 provinces in Sri Lanka to implement the national adaptation plan of the country, and working across 8 thematic sectors, and working with the provincial governments to really think about how the provincial governments could also bring in that locally led adaptation aspect, but also not just to have a plan, but also linked to the financing discussion. That brings us to the developing a scalable and meaningful project pipeline. I want to thank the University of Twente for the great relationship and the partnership that we have built, and also working with us for this gaps and guidance good practice tool that we developed. And I really hope you look at it in detail and use it for your work at your country level. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chala, also to highlight the work that GGGI is doing on the country to support them really for development and implementation. Now, I hope that you will indulge me. We will take just one single brief question because we are running a little bit out of time. And in the next part of our session, I have some questions for you. So if there is any question for the floor, please, if you can introduce yourself, please. And if you can be concise in asking.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohammed. I'm coming from Uganda. Just my question goes to the Prof. Indeed, the observations that came out from the assessment is very good from what you have presented. But I just want to ask you a question whether you looked into the implementation plan of this NAP, because sometimes they're not in the main document of the NAP, and some countries put them as a different implementation plan. Did you look into that?
Thank you very much. Please, Diane.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. We have so far not done that. We also thought that in a future step, if there is one available, we should do that. It's a little bit a difficulty in terms of that some countries have it and some don't. Yeah. But it's a correct point. I think where it is available, it should at least also be assessed. So that is part of the future plan. Yeah. Thank you.
So I would like to engage in a bit of the dialogue with you. We're having a Mentimeter set, but there's a bit of technical problems, so we will do it as old-fashioned, a little bit live. I hope that you can hear me well. So I have 2 sets of questions for you, starting from the discussion that we've been hearing from our speakers. And based on your experience with NAP specifically, but broadly with adaptation, I would like to ask you which are the key barriers and which are the key opportunities regarding development and implementation of NAPs. Anybody would like to start? Please. May you introduce yourself also? I will get you a microphone in a second.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Alexander. We're working with Ryman together on climate-related issues since many, many years. Maybe one example from my experience, because previously I was working at UNDP, I was supporting our ministry from my home country of environmental protection on developing the NAP. And what I discovered, and for me it was quite interesting, that they're not looking at the DRR side, so just risk reduction, so which means they're considering this topic only like separated from other topics. But as you know, Sendai framework and the Paris Agreement, they are all part of the one agenda 2030. So this is quick reaction. Not exactly. The data is the next level of the problems, but the point is that the planning doesn't encompass adaptation plus disaster risk reduction, because they're coming all the way together, and this is like the most tricky thing that I discovered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who would like to add something? Any direct experience on the country or regarding NAPS or adaptation?
Yeah, so my name is Eric Kofi Afanope. I'm from Ghana. We are still in the process to develop the NAP, and of course, there are quite a lot of things that we are doing also alongside. One thing is to develop climate vulnerability and risk assessment, to build a database, and of course, me working at the Ministry of Local Government, and also seeing the process going on at the Environmental Protection Agency. We also understand that there's some level of collaboration at the national level, and that's one thing that needs to be taken seriously. What collaboration that we have to prepare the NAP, and what implementation plan and the data that we can use to support it. But I think one thing that is not clear or being done is the investment plan to support NAP. I don't know which country or where this is being done to showcase, but of course the investment plan to support the NAP is quite invisible, and I think that is something that we can also talk about.
No, and thank you very much. Actually, we wanted to keep this as a last fundamental question, as Charles also mentioned a minute ago. Finance. Where are we getting money from? Where do we get the money and support from for developing the NAPs? And most importantly, how we finance even all the ambitious action that our chair of Lex was explaining us. Where do we find the money? Anybody would like to contribute to this tiny little minor discussion about how to finance adaptation, specifically the implementation of NAPs?
Thank you very much. I would say that the first principle for finding the NAPs could be the national treasury. I would say that as we try to grapple with the problem of climate change, you try to look at the cross-cutting issue of these, and they are everywhere. But when trying to look into the international architecture of mobilizing resources, it is really very slow, and the impacts are really escalating. So I believe that our national treasury should start by putting in the small thing that they have, as we try to look for bigger monies that could help us to implement the problems. So if you still sit back and you wait until when you write a proposal which can take 5 years before you get the money and then start implementing, then communities will be wiping out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who would like to contribute to this?
Thank you so much, and that's a very huge question you opened up. I'll introduce myself now. Yes, my name is Rick den Hoed. I'm from the Netherlands. I think there's various issues. I think one that's really important is that finance is too scattered around, so it's really difficult to get an integral sense of all the finance options that are out there and to properly access them. I think that we see, at least in our research, that costs a huge degree of capacity. Then the second one is that it's very often way too difficult to access. which is something that definitely needs work. And then thirdly, I think that there could be a way to think about how we could get more non-traditional partners involved, so to get multilateral development banks more involved, to get the private sector more involved, to kind of make it a joint effort. I mean, we've all seen the studies. There's a huge need for financing of NAPs for adaptation, globally speaking. And in order to do so, we just need a very broad base to be able to support it and to come up with the necessary amount of finance, because it's quite a bit, so to say. Thanks.
Yes, quite a bit indeed.
Thanks so much, Nicola. Good afternoon, everyone. Poria Sadahi from Italy. I think we all agree that resource constraints is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to development and implementation of NAPs, right? And we already learned from IPCC, we have a coordinating lead author of IPCC up there, that there's a huge gap in financing adaptation as opposed to mitigation, right? It's the second one. The third challenge is less room for experimentation. Because the reality is to be able to deliver better NAPs, we have to and we need to sort of integrate them with global goals and link to the type of capacities that we need. We are in a capacity building hub. And not only the type of capacities that exist and we just need to expand and transfer, but also some new capacities, partially digital finance. I was reading this report from colleagues in the UN Digital Finance Task Force about people's money. It's like how we can unlock new streams of financing for climate adaptation, including citizens' investment, right? So I think, like we all know that there is a huge gap, and then at the same time we know that adaptation is quite context specific. And therefore, I believe new innovative business models to implementation and development of NAPs needs to be embedded from the get-go to ensure that we really can take it to the scale and speed that we hope and we need facing climate change impacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pudri. That's actually a very comprehensive plan that you've been outlining. Anybody else would like to contribute to this bit of discussion? Yes?
This is Salim Khan from Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI. Like our friend mentioned about the citizen participation, likewise we have private sectors. There's a big window of opportunities available, private sectors to invest in adaptation. So far the history talks more about the mitigation perspective. Now we need to find a platform how best these private sector, private entities can be part of these adaptation initiatives. So we need to find something concrete and potential to make a platform for the private entities to come in for the adaptation.
Thank you very much. And I think that now the conversation is getting even more interesting, dynamic, and eventually this technological glitch is helping us to discuss it together. Please.
Yes, hi. I'm a little bit hesitant because I don't have a huge amount of experience with NAPs, but just sharing a few different ones. My name is Caroline. I work for a non-governmental medical humanitarian organization, Doctors Without Borders. And so in a few different countries where we're trying to engage with ministries of health on national adaptation planning, we do see a big struggle or lack of systematic engagement with NAPs. You have good guidance, for instance, so multi-sectoral engagement is a start point. Beyond that, if I look at specifically for the health sector, there is good guidance on writing health NAPs, HNAPs. But then this is anchored in the health mandate and there's no financing or means of implementation that follows. So even if you do get multi-sectoral engagement for the writing of your NAPs, which seems very variable, and what I've heard from other countries quite bureaucratic in getting other sectors to join in, you can't count that it will be there either in the risk assessment or in the priorities then to be delivered. The other thing I would say is that if you do find all these things, then you've got countries like South Sudan or, I mean, not to call out South Sudan specifically, but they have included some great health sector priorities. But there's a lot of discomfort from financial institutions working in humanitarian and conflict-affected contexts because it requires a certain amount of flexibility and a different way of implementation.
Thank you. My name is Hamed Tiamiu. I'm from Nigeria. I work with Community Action Against Plastic Waste. So from a bit of experience in Nigeria, I know a few years ago, CBN, that's Central Bank of Nigeria, and a few other civil society organizations developed a sustainability banking framework, which is basically to encourage banks to have a source of investment guideline for them to be able to invest in adaptation, to support either organization who are working on this or government, making it investment friendly. So people, the bank itself prioritize because they see, oh, they can actually make, profits, and it's a business friendly.
Thank you very much. I would like to continue this discussion, giving back the word to our speakers and panelists. Would you like to start there?
Thank you very much. Thanks. Great thoughts. Thanks to the audience for sharing their experiences and also, outcomes of their research. I totally agree to the finance aspect, also referring to my colleague from the Netherlands. What we've also heard from the leg chair, that there is one aspect where we could do better is already like harmonizing those streams that are available, or at least information towards those streams, and then make it easier to access it. And then maybe the other aspect that I think was a little bit directed to me, you can still have good plans, but it might still not lead to implementation. That is certainly that's certainly an aspect. I have also highlighted that M&E is very important in that respect, and that currently what we see in a lot of planning documents, not only on the national level and not only here in the countries that we looked at, but also in the countries of the global north, the M&E falls short. So if we could increase that aspect, then there's also the opportunity to go along a learning path. So to adjust from time to time according to changed socioeconomic but also climate conditions. So I really think that the M&E part is something where we should focus on, and that then also is an opportunity for more implementation, because then there is also a form of accounting that comes with it. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Diana. I will change a little bit the order, because I think it's important that the voice of the country is the last one to be heard. Please.
Thank you so much. Maybe I'll address the financing related questions. I think I think there were questions raised around the sources of financing for adaptation, which is very relevant, but there are also questions or concerns related to timing of adaptation financing and also the scale of it. And I always think, and I tell my countries, that if you wait to prepare the plan first and then later to develop the project pipeline. For us now, I know I'm a practitioner now, a project to be financed, it takes around 12 to 18 months, so sometimes it goes up to 24 months. And your plan is going to be expired, kind of, if we really don't develop the pipeline at the same time. And the other thing is the scale. I think adaptation doesn't have to be projects don't have to be so small. I think we need to also start thinking about project pipeline at scale, and then linking the pipeline to really bankable projects. I always think, okay, adaptation in terms of what? And we need to bring in aspects like climate smart agriculture, nature-based solutions, resilient cities. When you bring in those kind of thematic discussions and thinking to the whole planning, it becomes much easier to develop the pipeline. And we do have many projects GGGI is implementing on climate smart agriculture. I just came from Madhya Pradesh in India, where we are working with the farmer community in the Narmada landscape to really help the farmers to go into sustainable farming practices, and through that we are actually already increasing the water table, and I was told that the water table of that area has gone up by 18% by building stop dams in the Narmada River. So there are certain infrastructure solutions that we can bring in, and we need to think at scale and the practical ways of bringing in the financing discussion to this whole conversation. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gabriel.
Yes, thank you very much. I think my intervention has also to do with the financing. I think from the colleague from the Netherlands saying that there are a lot of financing, of course, that are available. So I think a good thing to go is how we can try to have a kind of a centralized system for people to know the scale of finance that are available as far as NAP is concerned. And then another key aspect is like to the countries themselves, especially for the private sector. So first I would start with the government itself. So it's good when you have a NAP, you make sure that the private sectors understand the NAP and how they can also help in the implementation. Because for example, the countries I'm coming from, and then also those I've been engaging with, there are a lot of grants that are available. But when they, of course, those CSO or private sector, of course, get this, of course, grant, they implement an activity they think is within their own regime. But if we try to make an app not only being a kind of a government process, but a national document, and then for other private sectors to come in and then to work with it, I think is very good. And also for the finances, I think the critical aspect has to do with costing adaptation priorities within. Because most of the costing within the NAP, I think they are indicative costs. Never mind, there are tools that are available, but it might cost your adaptation priorities to your option today. Maybe you don't have the fund in the next 5 years or so before ever you implement. So that comes into the speed when it comes to, of course, implementing the adaptation priorities. So from the side of the leg, I think we'll continue working with all organizations that are available, and also working with institutions, especially those that have funding. Maybe we can also try to reconsider to direct your funding in making sure that the remaining LDCs that are yet to have their NAP can have those funds to formulate their adaptation priorities. Because if you don't have a NAP, it will be very difficult for you to address your adaptation needs, or else you can just go and then think about something and then you implement, and then the last facet has to do with the project itself. So I think it's good at the national level for countries to have let's say the culture of sitting together with multi-stakeholders, including CSOs, including private sectors and the government, for them to identify a particular vulnerable sector and then come on board with a kind of like a project, develop a project idea, and then they can, of course, identify a delivery partner to implement. So I'll stop here for now. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. I think that to have this conversation is open in between different type of parties, starting from knowledge organization with normative and operational mandate, and with the countries, with final beneficiaries of all this effort is extremely important. We need ultimately, as the ethos of this COP is calling, to have collaboration in order to strengthen mutually our capacity. I would like, as we are a little bit over time, I would like quickly to conclude. I thank again the organizer of this side event, Global Green Growth Institute, the University of Twente. I would like to thank very much our host, the Capacity Building Hub, for the excellent work, and I would like to have a round of applause for all of you. Last but not least, thank you for engaging in an open discussion today about this, and I would like to close thanking Shivanes and Stelios that has been working hard behind all this work and effort. They are not physically with us, but they've been following us. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon, not only to continue discussion, but to actually develop stronger and implement better NAPs. Thank you very much.